on the screen that's going to be there. So first of all, welcome to all of you members. And secondly, welcome to the people on the screen. We've got Will Roper, Steve Moore, Sally Watkins, and Shahid Yunus is supposed to be coming, but he's not there yet, so maybe he will arrive. But welcome and thank you for joining us. Are there any apologies for absence, please, Neil?
No apologies, Chairman, but Councillor Rance is on screen rather than in the chamber.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, I'd just like to give you a couple of reminders about some things that seem to have been creeping in lately. This is a meeting for genuine scrutiny of what the council's doing, and aggressive comments on political point scoring don't have any place in this committee. And secondly, if you're asking a question, please just ask the question. Don't make a speech before it. The time for speeches should be when we're making decisions. If the person you're asking the question of doesn't understand the context of the question, then they can ask you to explain it. And finally, if you want to speak, please wave your hand very actively. If I appear to be scowling, it's because I can't see you very well through all of the screens. So make sure I notice if your hand is up. And please, when you're speaking, can you put the microphone on? All right, secondly then, the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I see those in favour of them as a correct record first? Sarah?
I just wanted to ask, under point 13, which was the previous minutes of the meeting, there were some things going to be added in, and they've not been added into those June minutes. Can I just ask when they're going to be added in, please, as we did approve them as correct?
Neil, you can answer that.
Yeah, I'll sort that out outside the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. There's an agreement with them as a correct record, though. Put your hands up if you do. Thank you very much. That's nobody against, so they are agreed. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Public questions? None. And member questions? None received. Thank you very much. Right, well, we now move to item 6, which is 27 actually on your 28 on your agenda, the performance report for Q1 of 21-22. I'm going to take this report in 2 separate parts, so if you could keep them separate, that would be helpful. First, we're going to look at the layout and the kind of information that's now being presented. Will has done, and is still doing actually, a lot of work to improve that. And he would like to have our feedback on the presentation and how it's being reported. So we'll do that first. And then we'll look at the specific KPIs that people want to raise or ask any questions about. So I'll ask Will if he'd like to begin by just introducing him to some of the most recent changes. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Shahid was planning to attend the meeting, actually, to take you through the changes and the development work that we're proposing and planning to do on this report, and indeed our KPI reporting in general. So perhaps if he's not with us just yet, if I could take everybody through the report proper, and then hopefully Shahid will be with us in a few minutes' time and he can do those 3 slides. So if that's all right with you, we just swap those 2 items around. Is that okay?
So what do you actually ask us to do, Will?
So if I present the KPI report, the main report, and then hopefully Shahid will be with us in time to present the improvement piece that we were going to do first. So if we just swap the 2 items around, is that okay? So
you're wanting them reversed compared to the way we. So we're looking at the individual KPIs first.
If we could.
Yep, okay. And they start on page 19. So let's look at those first. Neil did ask if anybody had any questions that they wanted to raise to email him. He tells me nobody did, but Does anybody have any questions that they want to raise on these KPIs now? Paul and Sarah.
Thank you, Chairman. But first of all, it's certainly good to see on Appendix B on how the status has been determined, which I asked for on the 16th of June, so that's very welcome. On page 40, CIC 8, fly tipping, on the graph covering the 2018-2019 to the middle of 2020-21, indicates an increase, it levels off, and then recent decline. Some arbitrary target of 600 has been chosen as the target matching virtually the peak. And its RAG status is shown as green, but it clearly isn't. How has that been established, that 600? Because it really should be something lower. And how has green come out? That's my first question. Shall I go through a couple? Or,
What would you like to take them one at a time, Will?
or do you want to do that one first?
We do them one at a time?
So yeah, happy to do them one at a time. So first and foremost, well, thank you for that feedback. We will be having that Appendix B completed for the next time this report is brought forward. So for Q2, so you'll be able to see all the target context for all of the KPIs, as well as benchmarking where we have them. We were only able to do that for the KPIs that we were calling out in the covering report because of the time constraints and work constraints, but we will have that completed for the next quarter. I'm afraid I don't know the details off the top of my head, so I'll have to take that piece away unless Steve, who's just pinged up, is able to help with that.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, Madam Chair. So in relation to Paul's question, it's a good question, and it's really around target setting, isn't it, really? And I think it's understanding, is 600 good, bad, indifferent or not? I mean, what I will say, don't have a direct answer for Paul on this one, but what I will say is we are looking at all of the environmental crime elements across the borough. There's no doubt, I think over the last 12 months, we have seen some fluctuations in fly tipping, but even as far as to say, because I had a meeting last week in relation to this with the team of actually how we define a fly tip. So what is a fly tip? Because there's different types of fly tips. Some is industrial scale, very much criminally intended and commercially advantageous for those that participate in it. And then there's a dumped black bag, if you like. And so there's domestic waste and there's industrial waste. So we need to do far more around intelligence gathering and information to actually dissect this information down into certain elements of fly tipping. We also need to do a lot more work in relation to the geographical aspects about where the fly tipping is occurring. And we need to make sure that we pinpoint our enforcement action using this data to catch those responsible, because ultimately we want to see a reduction in this antisocial activity. So it is on our radar. It's a PI and activity we believe there's improvement to be made on, and something that is very much in our thinking as we move forward with our new enforcement and safety model. So I can't give you a direct answer, Paul, but I'm with you in relation to the questions you're raising, and there's a bit more work to do in relation on this PI.
Thank you. Jim, your second question.
Yes, Steve. Thank you for that, Steve. Page 43, PG20, proportion of waste sent to landfill, with more recycling, etc., indicated in PG19 and PG21. Why is the more being sent to landfill?
Madam Chairman, I can pick that one up, Madam Chairman, if you wish. Yeah.
Yes,
So
Paul,
it's a good observation, and one I questioned myself. I understand there were some operational difficulties within RE3 for that period, so where they would be able to divert more away from landfill under normal practices. I believe they had some mechanical breakdowns within the plant for a short period of time, and that created an adverse performance for that period, and that should have been covered in the commentary, so apologies.
Okay, Jim, you've got one more.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, it'd been very useful if it was in the commentary. and I wouldn't have had to ask the question. So if that could be inserted any time there is anything like that, that'd be very useful. If I could have one more, Pauline. Page 49, return on investment portfolio. Big. It shows green, but is below the target. So it's not green. It's not really green. I think it probably should be amber. And when you compare that, looking at page 55 for the status, it shows that it should be amber, not green. Would you agree?
Will or Steve?
I had to defer that one to Will in this case, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Will.
So apologies, I think I'm going to have to take that one back to the service just to get some clarity on that. The variance is plus or minus 1%. No, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Yeah, I'm going to need to take that one away. There is a tolerance from the target, which isn't desperately clear in the appendix. So we'll take that away, and I'll come back with an answer.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
And Sarah.
Thank you very much. And thank you. These reports are starting to make a lot more sense than they have done in the past. I actually did pick up on RA10 as Paul has done, and RA15 is the same, council tax collection. It's marked as green, but it's actually below target. So those two have slipped through the net there. I wanted to ask, firstly, I raised last time about what is now a retired KPI, which was the CS5, which was the percentage of former care leavers who weren't neat, because I commented on it being a very low threshold. This target's now being retired, and instead there's a new KPI which looks at all 16 and 17-year-olds, which paints a very rosy picture. I don't understand why the original KPI has been removed, because understanding how well our care leavers are doing is really important. And I'd like it to go back to the service, please, that I think we should still be having that KPI. And
Sarah, which page are you on, please?
well, this is the Children's Services KPIs. So if I just scroll down, well, 29 is the Children's Services one, and the new one, CS5, it says percentage of 16 to 17-year-olds with activities, destinations not known. And then if you go on to the Appendix C, where it's got the retired ones, it has the old CS5, which specifically looks at children in care. Because I queried last time about the fact that 52% and above being green wasn't really ideal. And we've now just removed that KPI. And actually, I think it's a really important one. It's really important we understand how well our children in care are doing. So I appreciate there's no one here from Children's Services tonight, but could that be fed back to the Directorate, please?
Is that okay, Will? Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we'll pick that up with the Director of Children's Services, and we'll get a response on that. It might just be that we need to set a little bit more context around the KPIs that we have chosen to bring forward, but we'll make sure those are reviewed.
Thank you. And just while we're on,
Just ask Will, sorry to interrupt, Sarah, because that is quite an important question. Would you mind emailing all of us when you found out the response from the Director on that one, Will?
Yes, of course, we can share that with you. Yeah.
thank you.
Sarah.
And just while we're on Children's Services, on the overview report on this one, which is page 22, and it's talking about opportunities. I was really pleased about the successful UNICEF application. And I just wanted to pick up on the point there about strengthening cross-directorate working. There has been quite a substantial issue the last 2 weeks with this when it comes to school transport, where there's been a bit of a breakdown of communication between directorates here, where some children were stranded at a school. Some children are having to race across a busy road to get to a bus. It's not good. And given how important this is, and it's highlighted in this report, I'd like to understand what is being done to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. So I don't know if there could be something coming back from both directorates about this cross-directorate working, really, to keep our children safe, please. I see Steve's got his hand up because obviously he represents the other directorate.
Yeah, Steve, Steve, have you got an answer to that one, please?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah. We've been doing a lot of work on this over the last few weeks. Without going into too much detail, the service went under quite a major transformation period over the last 12 months with re-tendering of contracts and looking at new suppliers, looking at route optimisation. Without going into details, an awful lot of work to do in 12 months, and staff from all sides within children's services and the community transport unit team that sits in PNG have worked very, very hard, and I'd like to give them credit for the amount of work they have done on this. It's been a very difficult time for them as well, appreciating that, of course, some of the outcomes have caused anxiety and angst for some of our parents, of which is something absolutely we wanted to avoid at all costs. So there's learning to come out of this, Sarah. I've been talking to Carol, as Director of Children's, and we've been talking to the teams and the SEND staff. I can give you assurances that throughout the last few months they have been working closely together. But irrespective of that, they're obviously, we would have wanted to notify parents a lot earlier in the process in relation to their new requirements for their children, obviously. But unfortunately, for a number of reasons, that wasn't the case, mainly due to a lot of late return of applications. But without going into the detail too much, there's learning out of this for us as an organisation. We've taken that on. We've already had a couple of meetings, and there's a learning group been set up by both children's services and those staff in PNG to make sure when we do these things again, they're far more efficient, and the communication to parents is a lot better than what it was this time. So I fully take on board the comments. We're aware of them, and making sure that any issues we face this year don't reoccur again.
Thank you. That is reassuring. Can I ask one last question?
Yeah, one more, Sarah.
Thank you. That's great. It's in relation to CIC1, which is the recorded crime. It's obviously a very complex KPI, including many different aspects, and it does relate to that increases in poverty may have an impact out of necessity and obviously domestic abuse. I'm wondering if in the Q2 report, please, can we ensure that we have a really detailed narrative provided around this, please, because this is going to be looking at the trajectory. This might be something we need to dig into a little bit deeper, please. Is that okay, Will?
So again, Steve might be able to give some more information on this. But
Okay, I didn't think that fitted into Steve's directorate.
It does now. So,
Okay.
So I agree. I think when you're looking at crime and crime stats, it's very complex. What is the data showing you? What is it telling you? Are things going up? Like, for example, in this report, we might get more reported incidents, but that maybe is a direct result of more police activity because they're targeting on a certain element of crime, so they're catching more people and encouraging people to report a lot more. It is a mindful of data, community safety, but I totally agree with you. We need to get into the detail a little bit more. We need to look at these PIs. If it's burglary, then why is it happening? What are we doing about it? Do we know if there's 2, 3, 4 offenders operating in the borough? And sometimes it can be as little as that. You can have 1 or 2 people operating and your stats go through the roof. That's my experience. So I do agree with you. I think the community safety PIs, we need to refine. We need to make them a lot more meaningful so members understand exactly what it's telling them, what's going on in the borough, where there's trends that are on the increase. And this will be part of our KPI review that we're doing in year at the moment. So when we move into 22-23, we can furnish members with meaningful or more meaningful performance information that actually tells them exactly what's going on in the borough. And also alongside that, what activity that we're doing as officers with our partners in the police to drive down crime. But I do agree with you. There is more work to articulate this clearer than what's been done to date.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And making sure that there's detail on domestic abuse reporting in that as well, please, will be really important, because I appreciate that would have been underreported during the lockdowns.
Thank you,
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes. Thank you.
Rochelle.
Okay, I have questions on CIC2, CIC3, which are on page 38 and 39,
Thank
and
you.
CIC13. They're all related, which is on page 41. more or less this is homelessness and rent collections. Considering that universal credit is being cut effectively, and the furlough scheme has ended or is ending in the process, how is this going to affect? And combine this with the Brexit caused problem with the cost of gas in the UK and the shortage of gas, which will mean rising rate. So the poorest people who are in secure accommodation or in accommodation may be having a problem maintaining that. And the borough may not be collecting all the rent. What is being done by the borough to help this situation?
Steve or Will? Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Rochelle. So housing demand, the pandemic, post-pandemic impact, economic impact, lots and lots of questions there in relation to how people may have been affected from the economic perspective. So what I say to you is this. So housing services has recently come into my portfolio as well. It's an area I know a lot about. I'm talking to the team about it. We're looking at trying to understand the reasons for increased demand to see if it's been in relation to the pandemic. You'll know that during the pandemic, we obviously have carried out a rough sleeper initiative, where people who we normally wouldn't have a statutory duty to house, we've decided to house to help to get off the streets. That increases demand and all the associated support that comes with that as well. But I think it's also fair to say we have seen an increase in presentation coming through the system. So we're working through the data at the moment, Rochelle, so to make sure we are not being anecdotal in our responses, but factual and it's evidence-based. So we can see very clearly who is presenting, where they're coming from, what's causing that demand of presentation. So you might naturally conclude that, oh, it's people being evicted out of private rented sector because the eviction ban's gone and people can't afford their rent anymore. That would be a statement in itself and a logical statement, but is that the fact that's going on in the borough that's actually driving that demand? So we need to get underneath the data, and we're doing that work now, Rochelle. We're pulling that data together. So we've got an in-year position of what's happening with housing demand. But more importantly, we've got an accurate trajectory going forward to 22, 23 and beyond about where we believe demand in the system may increase. And of course, once you understand the causes of that demand, you can then put in place preventative measures to minimise and reduce the demand in the first place. So we've brought in a housing specialist into housing. He's an ex-director of housing within London Borough. He's very, very experienced with dealing with housing demand, temporary accommodation, and ensuring the housing service is fit for purpose to deliver with our allocations policy, with our nominations, through our housing associations, through the revision of our policy. So all of this work is going on, Rochelle. It's a key priority for me within place and growth to make sure this high risk area of demand is addressed and we're supporting the most vulnerable in our communities. What I can say in relation to rents is I haven't seen anything alarming in relation to rents, but it's something that we do watch very closely. We don't wait until people get into difficulty and then deal with it from an enforcement point of view. We put in place early flags in the system so we can see when people are falling into difficulty who wouldn't normally be falling into difficulty. And our excellent offices within the housing services go out and visit people when we see that data on a face-to-face basis and talk to them to ask them about if they are struggling. Are there things going on in the household we need to know about? Is there any way we can support? Can we give you some sort of financial advice or help or assistance? So all of that preventative upstream working does take place, and the rental service, through working like that over the last few months, has seen major improvements. So I suppose in summary, Rochelle, we are on it. We know what data to look at. We know what evidence we need to pull together. And once we're clear on what the data is showing us from a demand point of view, we will then put in place the appropriate action plan to make sure we are minimising the likelihood of people falling into economic hardship and being able to sustain tenancies, because that ultimately is our goal. And I see that Sally's on the call as well, and Sally's leading a piece of work on anti-poverty at the moment that is linking very heavily in relation to this agenda and a wider agenda. So I don't know, Sally, if you just want to add a couple of comments in relation to what I've just said.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's great. So evening all. So as Steve said, we're starting to build our anti-poverty strategy at the moment, and the way that we're approaching this across the council currently is we are pulling together, as Steve said, that real kind of data, so we understand what's happening at a borough level. And as part of that, we are working to set up a cross-party working group, which will help the officers have the members' feedback on particular insights and information that officers can understand and take more interest in from a real kind of lived experience point of view. We're also working with the voluntary and community sectors to make sure that we've got their feedback as part of our anti-poverty strategy, and we're very much in that kind of discovery phase at the moment. But as Steve has just alluded to, the data and insight that we need to have to start to build that picture across the borough will be absolutely critical, so that we move from that kind of hypothesis point of view to real kind of solid facts, to make sure that the strategy that comes out of that process really meets the needs of our residents and businesses across the borough.
Thank
Okay,
you
I
very
have
much,
one more
Sally.
question. PG3 on page 44, the local plan update. You're talking that it's amber and no change. However, there was one total meeting between the time we found out we couldn't do Graiseley and this summer. The meetings were all canceled. Nothing seemed to be happening. And then after that, a lot more of the meetings have been canceled. There's still a lot of assumptions about things with the local plan update, such as one particular estate. They're thinking that everyone from that estate is going to be working in the science park, so therefore they won't need to drive any place. But its assumptions and the local plan update progress seem to be rather behind times. Let's put it this way. It should have been out already, and a lot of places will have problems because of that we don't have a current local plan. So therefore developers will be going like crazy. What are we doing for that? Since I'm on the local plan update committee, I'm interested as well.
Madam Chairman, would you like me to pick that up? Yeah. So thanks for the question, Michelle. So obviously the local development scheme has been published, which effectively is our timetable for the local plan. Certainly since I've been here since May, and I'm well aware lots gone on before that, that it was always earmarked to look at Reg 18, which is, for those that don't know, is like a publication of options that goes out to consultation, which is the back end of October. That is still on track. And then to move forward into Reg 19, which is the preferred option, which will be later next year. So we're still on target to have an examination. Obviously, we're at the hands of PINS, the Planning Inspectorate, to be able to hear that examination in public, but we believe that will take place in 2023, and we will have an adopted plan in 2023, which is the timelines. So as per the timelines had been set out under the LDS, which is the timetable, we are still on track. I can't comment in relation to consultation or meetings that may have taken place or not taken place. I know there have been a series of meetings taking place, but if you've got specifics, Rochelle, if you want to let me know about meetings you believe that should have been arranged that have not been arranged, I'm more happy to take those away and talk to Ian and his team about those. But the local plan is on track in relation to what's been published.
I will talk to you offline, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rochelle. One last question from Paul.
Thank you, Pauline. Allow me to come back. Appendix C on page 57, which is archived KPIs. PG16, enabling sustainable travel, length of greenways and cycleways delivered. It says that the KPI is reported through the Sustainable Communities Working Group, but how does this committee see that information and how can we scrutinise it? Thank you.
Is that Steve or Will?
I think I'd probably have to defer that one to Will because it's really about PIs that go into certain other committees and how we capture that. So Will.
Indeed, I think I'm going to have to defer it back to the ADs that we consulted when we retired the KPI, just to make sure that it should have been retired. If it's not one that's brought to this committee independently, then it might be appropriate to return back into the report. But I'll go away and I'll come back with an answer on that.
Yeah, if I could just add, Will, it's a key area for tackling climate change, sustainable travel. So I think it's certainly one that should be there. Thank you.
Very much. Belated welcome to Shahid. Shahid has this area under his portfolio as the deputy executive member, so he's come along in support of Will. And Shahid, we reversed the order in which we did things under this item, so we looked at the specific KPIs. We're now going back to look at things like presentation and how they're being reported, so we can give feedback to you and to Will. So, Will, would you like briefly to present the report and say what you've been doing since last time?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I think Shahid's actually going to take us through the deck. So if I put them up on the screen, and then I think Shahid would like to take us through the presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Will. Madam Chair, can I start with acknowledging the point which Sarah made earlier on, that these reports which you're getting from the KPI reports are improving with the time. They are far better than we used to have before. I remember when I was chairing one of the committees, scrutiny committees, a couple of years ago, there's always used to be an issue regarding the context and also the timely nature as well. So what I've got a couple of slides basically just to highlight. I just want to share with the committee members the work which is going on behind the scenes. Hopefully you'll find this useful, not only useful, but actually for the sake of transparency, in my role as a deputy executive for corporate strategy, insight and change. I've been working with the officers to collectively, with Steve, with Sally, with Will, how can we become actually better performing council? How can we actually improve our performance management? What are actually measuring at the moment KPIs? Are they the right KPIs? So questioning them, because KPIs, obviously, they should be dynamic, not static. And if so, that's one of the work which is going on. But also moving forward, we just want to become a great organization which has got more insight, and therefore we can make better decisions as an organization. First slide, please, Will. I don't need to say, as you probably all know, the data, successful organizations make better decisions, and the underlying all of that is actually data. So more accurate, more timely the data you have at the operational level, middle management and strategic, you can more likely to make better decisions. Data, as you know, is sometimes considered the oil of the 21st century. And those organizations who are able to manage it, mine it, harvest it, and get better insight, they are more likely to be actually, successful organizations. So from our point of view, Woking Borough Council, it'd be useful for you to know that by the time you get these quarterly, KPIs, the amount of work which goes on behind the scene. So what you see on the left-hand side is basically there are about 25 data sets which the team has to work on, and some of them are small, some of them are very large. There are about 16 reporting systems where information has to be extracted from, collated, modeled, and put in a format, and obviously gone through a number of senior officers as well to make sure the accuracy of the data before it goes to the executives and the scrutiny members. Because there's a lot of, and there's about 35 officers involved in producing this report. And if you actually put this time to it, there's quite a considerable cost goes behind the scenes to produce this cost. So we're looking at it, how can we perhaps become much more effective and efficient, and obviously in doing what we're doing. Obviously, data must be cleaned and modeled to make it meaningful and useful to draw insight. It's important that what information you get here as scrutiny members, you can trust that data. So therefore, there's a lot of work goes behind the scenes to make sure that the quality of the data is improved, and therefore you can actually trust the information which is being given to you. So where are we now? We have KPIs that report on the performance on the services. I mean, that's what you get constantly. With over time, there has been a lot of improvement, and thank you to the officers for actually making that improvement as we're going along. But what we find is that information is often delayed before it can be reviewed by senior leadership or scrutinized. This has been a constant issue, that information sometimes it gets to the scrutiny members, is 3 months out of date, 4 months out of date, and that sometimes it actually loses the value by the time it gets to the senior stakeholders. So the delay in reporting means it can be viewed as a limited use to the officers and the members as well. So how can we improve, make sure we get the information in a timely fashion? Also, we find is that dispersed data means dispersed insight held around the organization. So we have a number of departments, they have their own information, and there's a lot of, perhaps if you can say, silo work is going on. How can we get rid of that silo work so we work as an organization across the board? Next slide, please. Yeah. So where do we want to be? This is our aspiration, where we'd like to move to. Reporting KPIs that demonstrate how the council is progressing against the corporate delivery plan. We have a corporate delivery plan. We want to make sure that the KPIs which you measure actually are aligned with that. There's a less, there shouldn't be a disconnect between the two of them. So because that's what we identified at the beginning of the year, that is what is important to us. And we want to measure them, we want to monitor them, make sure we're making a good progress based on that. We want to make sure the information is more timely and close to as live as operational parameters allow within a layered dashboard approach from the corporate level down to through directors to individual teams. So the timeliness of the information, Madam Chair, is very, very important. We get this information almost real time as possible. We see the real other private sector organizations, look at Tesco, retail, or Sainsbury. At the end of the day, they know exactly how much they've sold, how much stock have they got, right? And how much, they owe to the suppliers, etc. All the information is actually on the fingertips. As a public sector, we need to do that. There's no reason why we can't do the same as well. Enabling quicker, better decision-making, drive a more efficiency and effectiveness. So this way, we want to make sure we are doing the right things and also in a right way as well. Using dashboards that will provide near real-time performance monitoring of key performance indicators. At the moment, the technology which is used at the moment is mostly Excel. There's a lot of technology available which can actually make our life means officers' life a lot easier. They don't need to spend a huge number of days and days to get this work done. It will save huge amount of cost as well. And also the outcomes will be better information, timely information, and also information which can be, or insight which can be shared by all stakeholders as well. And lastly, an insight-driven organization where staff, councillors, partners, residents, and businesses are able to use data pulled from across the organization. I want to emphasize, Madam Chair, this particular point. Insight needs to be enterprise-wide. It's not just departmental level. Yes, functional director of every organization needs to have insight. They need to understand what is going on within their function. Absolutely right. But also at a strategic level, we need to have an organization-wide insight so we can connect all the dots, because we cannot, each department is not cannot live in isolation. Anything happens in one department will have an impact across the organization as well. So therefore, enterprise-wide insight is very, very important. Next slide, please, Will. So this is the last slide. So what is our approach? What are we doing to highlight the challenges which I've highlighted? We put this in 3 phases. Phase 1, what we are doing is reviewing our KPIs, questioning that, what we are measuring, are we reporting on, are they the right measures? Report what really matters. Steve and Will highlighted that earlier on. I think that should be a continuous process because we want to be a learning organization. We want an organization which continues to improve with time. And some of the things actually already been highlighted here. Perhaps some things, KPIs should be included, perhaps they're not included, and some KPIs are included, perhaps they're not actually adding any value to it. So that's something we need to look and continue to look across with time. And secondly is KPIs reflect the corporate delivery plan and statutory requirements. So as a council, there are some statutory requirements we have to fulfill. Are we fulfilling those in real-time basis? Can we monitor them? Can we show an evidence that we are actually doing that? And can we share that evidence across all the stakeholders? Second phase is deploying the technology. As I just mentioned, there is a lot of technology available which can make us much more effective, much more efficient in the way we do the things. And the idea is to adopt those technologies and share that insight across the board. Other thing is that there's a lot of manual work going on at the moment. So we have, as I mentioned, 16 databases in different systems. Information is manually extracted, all collated, modeled, and cleansed, and then put in a format which is meaningful to the end users. There's a lot of manual work going on. There's no reason why we shouldn't need to do that. I would say 80% of the work can be automated, and we should use the technology to do that. That will enable us to get the information in real time. Develop reporting to be as timely as possible. I mean, one example is, if we have got that capability, what I'm talking about here is developing the capability. There's a lot of good stuff going on in the council, but we feel there's a lot we can improve on that. COVID is one example. We cannot wait for information, a couple of weeks down the line. It has to be real-time information, and that is, a lot of good stuff has been done by the council, using real technology and information in real-time basis to identify where the cases are happening and therefore react to that situation very quickly. Other thing is standardized formats across the organization. We can compare one department against it's apple against apples. That's very important. We have the standardization, the same standards across the data definitions and standard across all our departments, and create a single point of reference on performance. Again, single data, single format information which has gone through the quality checks and kite marks, which everybody can trust on. So that is the only way we can actually increase the trust of all stakeholders. And lastly, in phase 3, enable the decision, the discussion, support services to adopt the change. Again, I think this is one of the biggest challenges we've probably got is people are used to a certain way of doing things. So what we are doing is basically asking them to reconsider. It's a different way of doing things. So this is more of what I'm referring to here is a cultural change of the organization. We need to think of it as like an organization. Every person, every stakeholder has a role to play in this. And this is changing the culture of the organization. Improve understanding of what the KPIs are and their links to corporate plan. Again, it's an educational awareness program within the organization, so everybody understands that what KPI is and how it's linked to the corporate plan and what does that actually mean for the organization. Deploy dashboard reports at a strategic and operational level to improve decision-making down through the organization. As I said before, there's a different insight required at a different level. At operational level, officers who are actually at the front end, they require different type of information. Middle management, they require different type of insight, different types of insight. And at strategic level, they require a different type of insight. So what we're saying is that the system we have in place, they should be able to provide the appropriate information in a timely fashion to whoever the stakeholders is. And including in the stakeholders are also us as councillors as well. Wouldn't it be nice to have our information regarding demographic information, for example, for our wards, right on our fingertips, rather than asking the officers, can you give me this XYZ information? I think it will help us as councillors to be better councillors if we got that information at our disposal, and utilize the data lastly to develop insight. So again, enterprise-wide insight, that was what we're referring to. I just want to close, Madam Chair, saying that there are very few organizations, councils across the country who are doing the work what we're starting to do. And if we get this right, it will be a complete transformation, not a step change. It will be a complete transformation, how we actually run the organization as a council, and how this will enable us to provide timely information to all stakeholders, accurate information to all the stakeholders, and also better decision-making as a result of that. And what does that mean? It means we can manage our assets better, we can manage our finances better, we can manage our people better, and also we can effectively serve our communities as a result of that. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Shahid. A very detailed presentation. Will, do you have anything to add to that, or shall we move directly to questions?
No, I think Shahid summed it up very nicely. I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shahid, I'm very glad that you're addressing the fact that the data is 3 months out of date, because as you know, that's been one of my personal ongoing frustrations for many years, and it's the only way that we can improve our performance in a timely way. Do you know when we're likely to see that particular change?
Madam Chair, at the moment, I don't want to like to commit because, officer, we are discussing this. I mean, we just for sake of openness, we thought it would be useful to let you all the committee members know what is happening, the discussion taking place. The KPI review is working at the moment, indicative times. So don't hold me to this, but we are working towards refining the KPIs, working with the stakeholders by the end of the year. And then produce the new KPIs in a different format in the last quarter of this financial year, which is from January onwards. And then potentially our target is, again, this is, we'll put it together as a program at the moment, to have the new KPIs in a different format and using the different technology in the Q1 of next financial year. So that's the sort of timeline we're working until. So that's one piece of work which is going on. So this reviewing the KPIs, secondly, using the technology, but also there's a much bigger piece of work which we'd like to start in the beginning of next year as well. And that is towards the enterprise-wide KPI insight. That means extracting information, automating the whole extraction process, cleansing it, and creating a better insight across the all organizations. Because as I said before, Madam Chair, it's very important to connect all the dots, from one, because one department, children's services, for example, if something happens in that, it's going to have a knock-on impact on people, on facilities, and on finances. So we can't actually isolate one decision with the other because they will have an impact. So that's the capability. I would say typically I've seen in other organizations, the positive thing is that the senior management is fully supporting this and at all level, and there is a lot of momentum there, and officers are really behind this. And thanks to Sally and Steve and Will, they are doing fantastic stuff. But we need to support them, political support they require from our side, and also I think it'd be useful for the members to give feedback as well as we go along. So if there's anything you find perhaps we can improve on, it's part of the learning process, improvement process, then now is the time to give your feedback, and that is always welcome.
Thanks for letting us know that you're working on that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on either anything that Shahid has said or in the paper itself on how it's presented, or anything else you'd like? I've seen Paul, then Sally, and then Guy.
Yes, thank you, Shahid, for your presentation. Very, very enlightening. You mentioned about an automated system. Would that mean that would be able to obtain monthly data instead of quarterly?
Thanks. Actually, I'm talking about daily, to be honest, because there's no reason why we can't do that. It's up to, but again, we need to develop that capability. I certainly would be I know officers are listening, as well, but we're working together on this. There is no reason why we can't do that on a regular basis, in real time if possible. Technology is there, we can do it. It's all a matter of scheduling it. We got the information in our databases, or it's a matter of extracting it. Whether we extract it on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis is our decision. And there's nothing stopping us from doing that. So if we want to become better organization, then why would it become, okay, latest as a 24-hour delay maximum? That's what I would like to see.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm hopeless with names, apologies.
That's okay, thank you. Apologies for facing this way, Shahid. Yeah, it sounds really positive, and it sounds like the kind of thing that we need. It has been frustrating over the last couple of years while I've been on this committee when we get these reports, and they are going in the right direction. So it does sound really positive. I have two questions. Firstly, there are obviously some annual KPIs, which we had last time round that haven't appeared in this report, so they weren't there because they were annual. Are we going to get a separate annual KPI report to look at in these committees, or are we going to have those into Q4, or when are we going to? I just want to make sure they don't get lost. If they're dropped off this one, we still get them.
Sally, Steve, please chip in when you feel appropriate. As I said, we are reviewing the KPIs at the moment. Some of them will probably stay what they are, and some of them new ones may be added, or some of them may drop. Right. The thought was that rather than actually changing that process and reporting process in middle of the year, it makes sense to continue with the same what we're doing now until the end of the financial year, and then start the new process from the beginning of the financial year. That's the sort of process we're looking at.
Before Sarah goes on, can I just fill in you, Shahid, and Will, because neither of you were doing this job when we began to look at this. We did ourselves begin to look at what KPIs we wanted, because there were thousands, most of which had no impact on the public, so were pretty useless to look at. And then we asked each director to identify the ones that they thought important, and we had a look at that. So we have moved quite a way in the last year or so. But if Sally would like to come in,
yes,
in answer
thank you
to Sarah's question, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think Sarah's point was in particular about when we bring the annual KPIs forward. So absolutely, from our perspective, they are really helpful because we can roll up all of the quarters together and you start to see that annual performance against those KPIs. And as we develop the technology, obviously, we'd want to make sure that we're providing that information in a timely fashion. Just to reiterate the point around our kind of three-phase approach. At the moment, we're absolutely headlong into that kind of technical piece, because without a doubt, that's going to be a real kind of chunky area for us to look at. Adopting some of our technology sets that we've invested in as a local authority is absolutely the right thing to do, and will bring us in line with a lot of the private sector approach around around consuming data. Part of that kind of thought process is making sure that we retain our existing KPIs until the end of the financial year, because changing KPIs in year, it's not something that we would do, because immediately you start losing the thread of what we've compared, as Shahid said, kind of comparing apples with apples. So for us, making sure that we've run Q4, if we can, continuing to do that on the existing KPIs, but actually looking to see how we could surface that using the new technology. Now we'll be aiming to do that in kind of a trial proof of concept piece, so you'll still receive your KPIs in the normal fashion, but actually if we can start to get early insight on Q4, then we'll absolutely do that. But we don't envisage that KPIs will change in year. Any kind of changes to the KPIs will be done by the directors in conjunction with their lead members, as you would expect, to make sure that we've got all of the data exactly right, because that process is absolutely critical, so that we come out with the very best KPIs that we need, and we can use both as officers, members and other stakeholders across the piece.
Thank you very much, Sally. Back to Sarah again.
No, thank you. Yeah, I guess a part of this piece is actually how they get presented to us in these committees, and I think that was one of the questions we previously had. There are some annual KPIs that don't come in the quarterly reports that I was referring to. So they've obviously been dropped off. That's that reference. The other bit was what Shahid mentioned about engaging with stakeholders for the actual KPIs by the end of the year. So obviously we are some of those stakeholders. There are KPIs in there that work. There are some KPIs, I mean, I've already mentioned a couple tonight that I don't understand why they've been dropped off and would very much like to see in. There are some, I mean, Paul mentioned the one about the PG16 that was dropped off, the cycling routes, which is now going to some sustainable communities working group. I mean, why we're not getting that, I don't know. But I guess what I'd like to know is, I take it there's an opportunity. I think we have 2 more of these committee meetings before the end of the year where you can come back and talk to us about the KPIs that we're looking at, and we can feed into that process, because it's very much about what we would like to see as well as the directors, so that we can, you know, obviously represent our residents better. So I take it's going to come to this committee in the next couple of meetings to feed into that.
Absolutely, Sarah. So when you talk about key stakeholder groups, ONS will be part of that piece. And your feedback is welcome across the board. So please do it. And like I say, we don't need to wait. So if there's any specifics that you think it's really helpful as things arise and you want to get it on our radar, if you email directly to Will in the first instance, apologies, Will, but he's obviously done on collating all of this information so that we can start to bring that to the fore as soon as we possibly can.
No, brilliant. Maybe we can have a discussion at the end when we look at the future committee. But I think we've got October and November left before the end of the year. So
Thank you, Sally. That's helpful.
thanks.
Guy?
Thank you, Chair. My question is basically around on the culture aspect, because this is clearly needed. We clearly need some improvement. I would be absolutely overjoyed if we can basically get, I would have been happy with weekly, but if we can get it down to days, I'll be very, very happy with that. But my question is more in regards to the culture aspect, in that what is being prepared by the executive leadership team, as it were, to prepare the members of staff under their directorates to adopt this culture. Because the challenge that I always see with changes like this is getting people to do it, and education and training is 80% of the battle in getting people to change their own behaviour. So what's that being at?
Madam Chair, shall I begin with that? And perhaps Sally, you can chip in. Or Steve.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. I mean, obviously, with the work which you're talking about here, it will actually impact almost everything across the organisation. It will touch our people, because we want to make sure we've got the right talent to actually do the work which needs to be done. It will touch our processes, making sure we've got the right process in place. It will touch technology, making sure we've got the right technology in place, etc. But the biggest challenge actually I find is, which you exactly highlight, is the culture of the organisation. Because it's a different way of doing things, because that's the officers, perhaps some of the officers are probably not used to it. The question is, how do we, this is what your question is, how do we address that? I mean, the first thing is that we need to take them with us on this journey. It's very important that we take them with us. We cannot sort of impose something on them, officers. They have to be part of this. So that's why we're starting as a prototype. Perhaps Sally can elaborate on that with LD Care, with Matt, his team. So we said, let's this be a prototype first, right? What KPIs do we need for that? So the whole director, senior leadership, we are working with them. So they are working with us to defining what those KPIs are. You know, if you, and like in anything, if they are part of the discussion, then they're more likely to adopt that change as well. But if you impose something on them, they're not probably going to a lot of resistance. So in we would work with every directorate, making sure they have got a stake in this and they're actually part of this process. And hopefully, and obviously larger education training program, which needs to be put in place as well. So this will put together as a complete program. And then obviously the education and learning is part of that. Sally, you want to chip into something?
Yeah, it's just to reiterate, I think, what you've said, Shahid. So we are running this, just to give some assurance, we are running this as a data and insight programme. So of which the technology, the culture, they're all separate work streams underneath that. So they will get the dedicated attention they need, because you're absolutely right. The cultural aspect of change is absolutely critical to ensure that we get that adoption and embed, and we don't kind of go back to traditional ways of operating. So for us, by running it as a programme that CLT will be cited on, we get that senior leadership, that organisational support, and we also get the priority and the understanding of the direction of travel, because this data and insight programme is absolutely critical for us. And obviously improving the technology and the KPIs that we have is just one aspect of that programme, as something that we're starting to form, I guess, at this point in time. And hopefully Steve can support that from a CLT representative tonight.
I certainly would do, Sally, if I might, Madam Chair. So just sort of positive. I mean, I've been here a few months. I haven't seen, I'm being honest, I haven't seen a resistance to this at all. This data, I know as members you're scrutinising it tonight, of course you are, and you're quite rightly asking us questions. This is all about getting to know your business, really, and it's probably the strongest management tool you can have as a manager of a service to get real-time data and information, because it's informing your business intelligence and what you need to do. And whenever I've spoken to any staff here about having better data, easier systems, better PIs, I've not seen a pushback at all. So there is an open door there, but it's about selling the benefits, because it can make your job more effective and efficient in making the critical decisions we need to make and take. And if I may, finally, Madam Chair, just recap on a couple of things that have been said from a process point of view here. And I know we've touched on it once or twice, but just to reinforce it, the most important thing to do here is to get the right PIs. And those PIs need to be business critical PIs. Not how long does it take to paint a blue door or a red door is a little analogy I always use all the time. Yes, I'm sure it's great to know how quick our painters and decorators are painting doors. But to be honest with you, we need to know about housing demand. We need to know about the costs. We need to know about what's going on in the borough, about crime and what we're doing about it and all these sorts of things. So it's business critical PIs that's meaningful for you, meaningful for us. Once we've got that, we need to make sure the targets that we set are fit for purpose. It's nice to have a nice suite of green flashing performance indicators, but are we pushing ourselves enough? Are we stretching ourselves towards excellence? Okay, so are we setting our benchmark into top quartile from a target point of view or not? So there's questions around that. We'll mention tonight around tolerances of PIs. So if you have, to me, I don't know why you have a tolerance within the PI. I've always questioned that, because actually your tolerance is red, amber, green as far as I'm concerned. So if you have a target, why do you put a 5% tolerance on it? At the end of the day, a target's a target, you've either met it or you haven't. And then it's about benchmarking, and then it's about understanding where does our performance sit with others who are comparable authorities, and where's our value for money. And that's the triangulation of all this as well. You've got performance, we're investing X amount in the service. We might not be the highest performing, but we might be the highest value for money performing service in relation to what others invest in. So it's a very complex area that requires a lot of unpicking. And I fully support the view that all of this work's got to go on between now and the end of March. So when we move into the first quarter next year, we can go live with the new PIs, not before, because I think we'll get confused otherwise. And actually, as Sally said, it won't really add any value having a new suite of indicators in Q4. What we need to do is make sure that all of this work, your involvement, the suggestions come forward, what business critical PIs we should be working through. So as we move into Q1 next year, we've got all the things I've said, the PIs, the targets, the benchmarking, the value for money info, and those sorts of things. Whether you can get daily information, we'll wait and see. But I think if you can improve on your 3 months to make it more meaningful, then that will be a step in the right direction. But thank you, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Norman.
Yeah, thank you. I think Steve just touched on most of what I was going to say. I think there are quite a number of the KPIs well presented in this report. They're nice and easy to follow. I think the visual presentation of quite a lot of them is very strong. So that's good. I think the main thing really is to get the correct KPIs in here. As Steve said, I think they've got to be things that are critical to us delivering the service, not absolutely everything in here. They are the key performance indicators. The staff, no doubt, will need lots of other indicators and lots of other information to run their departments. And getting the information regularly, no doubt, will help them do the jobs much more effectively and efficiently. I think we need to think carefully about frequency of reporting to councillors. Getting information 3 or 4 months out of date, not really particularly useful, but I don't know about anybody else, but I don't really want daily information. I think that would be information overload. So I think we do need to think very carefully about the frequency of information that we get in a summary form. I mean, we don't want the daily ups and downs of information and us asking thousands of questions of the staff. But on the other hand, we want to scrutinise at a sensible interval. So I don't know whether that's, you know, right at the end of that 3-month period or monthly or whatever. It's something we perhaps need to debate, but I think that we need to look at that quite carefully. Thank you.
Norman, what would be your suggestion?
I'm not sure, actually. Not sure.
I'd like to come back on that.
Madam Chair, actually, the point I made was daily is it depends who the stakeholder is. As councillors, we don't need to have daily information, right? But if you're the officer who are working on a daily basis with you know, you need to have timely information.
So what thoughts have you, all of you, had so far?
Sorry, just to finishing. So therefore, it depends who the stakeholder is, right? So basically what I said earlier on, just want to qualify, make sure it's understood correctly. Sorry, Mike, got a dry throat. Sorry.
I was just going to make a suggestion.
Can we let Shahid finish?
He just asked me to speak.
Sorry?
He just asked me to speak.
Oh, okay.
I'm just giving a bit of relief for a moment. I was going to suggest, you know, we obviously get these reports quarterly, but I sometimes think we get them in the wrong meeting. So we could have the Q1 report in July rather than September, because that is Q1 finishes in June and we have that in then July. We could have Q2 in the October meeting, Q3 in the Jan and Q4 in the April. And then we're actually getting them quite, I don't know how feasible that is, but it means that we're not waiting 3 or 4 months after a quarter's finished to get the data. So that was going to be my suggestion in the question you asked to Norman.
Any comment, Norman?
Yeah, I think that's sensible. I think you know, the first quarter by sort of mid-July or something like that, and then we're almost at the end of the second quarter now, but we're discussing the first quarter's KPIs. So yeah, I think quarterly is probably sufficient for council.
Shahid, are you lucid again?
Yeah, sorry about that. So I just was saying that it's about the capability. Once we develop that capability in the back end, then obviously different stakeholders can decide when they want the information. So it's what we're talking about here. It's much more bigger program than just reporting to the scrutiny committee. This information will be helpful to the officers who are the front level, senior middle management, assistant directors and directors, right? So, and obviously their needs are different. So what I was highlighting was that once you got the information, then whoever the stakeholder is, they can decide when they want that information, right? So while I've got the speaking, can I actually make a couple of more comments as well, please? Just the point one, the 3 points. One, Steve mentioned about the important KPIs. I think that's absolutely very important, because some people, stakeholders, they will say, we would like to have this KPI. There will be some hard questions asked. Why? Why do you want this KPI? And it's important to, you know, you justify why we want this KPI, because end of the day, we end up having hundreds of KPIs, which actually, when you start monitoring them, it just becomes a nightmare and it's not adding value at all. So even going through the process, there will be some hard questions as well, you know, just why we need this KPI. And absolutely, as Norman said, is we should have those KPIs which are really adding value to our organization. That's number one. I mentioned 3 phases, even though I just want to make sure that it's not misunderstood. Some of the work actually is being done in parallel. So it's not serial, one after the other. some work which the KPI stuff is already, we started, but also enabling the discussion, that's already, some of the work has started as well. So some of the work which is going on is actually in parallel work. And again, roughly the timelines we talked about. And lastly, once we got this capability developed, at the moment, if you look at by nature, reports are, you're looking backwards. A report, when you look at reports, all you're doing is looking backwards. What happened in the past? That's fine. It's good to know. But actually moving forward, I would like to know how much actually, how can I would like to know the prediction in the future as well. How can I actually manage, estimate my demand? So therefore I can allocate resources based on demand. So what I'm talking about here is moving from descriptive analytics, which is what happened in the past, to predictive analytics to see what's likely to happen in the future and manage from that. That's moving from reactive organization to proactive organization, and that capability we will get, and officers will get as a result of the work which we are doing, which is very important, and that's the way I think we should move as an organization. For example, Steve talked about antisocial behavior, and if you think about it, to understand those or the whole concept, the data is coming from multiple data sources. It's not just one, right? So it'd be good to actually firstly analyze the data from multiple data sources, but also based on that, we can actually do predictive analytics as well, see potentially where the antisocial behavior is coming from and target our resources to prevent things happening rather than react to when things do happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe the officers could take on board Sarah's suggestion and have a think about whether July, October and January would be the most relevant months to bring it. But I'll leave it up to you to work through that and come back and let us know. It does seem that we would see the information a bit sooner that way. Has anybody else got any further suggestions or anything else they'd like to feed back? Yes, Sam.
Yeah, I'd like to say, a really great presentation, Councillor Shide. I think that some really good points there. I think the main thing is just, this is something that we can learn a lot from enterprise, and I know from business, I think it's done a lot. And I think it's just being mindful of cost, because as we know, these things can sometimes, if you work in the world of business and, these can spiral. So I think just being mindful of that and, getting the best use case in terms of cost out of all the systems that we look to implement.
Madam Chair, can I come back on that one?
Sure.
I wouldn't use the word cost. I would use a word investment. The reason I say that is there is a whole research has been done by Harvard Business Schools and the top business studies. Every dollar you spend, every pound you spend, you get £10 a return on back. Why? Because there's so much efficiency to gain from this as a result of that. Look at the officer time which they spend on in terms of manual work, manual extraction, checking the quality of the data. And I think there's a cost there already, which is not productive. We'd rather have 80 at the moment. Potentially, most organizations, I would say, Woking Borough Council is no different. 80% of the time is spent actually extracting the data and cleaning the data and putting in the format which is required, and only 20% actually on the analysis. Our officers are very high caliber officers, right? Obviously we pay the cost associated with that. We would like to spend time on the analyzing the data and making better decisions, which means switch this around, automate the whole process, that where the 20% of the resources should go to, and then 80% of the time should be actually spent on analysis. So I'm just sharing that information from other organizations who have done it, and they are saying this is an investment we are making, which is give us the results which are far, far greater than what we invested.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yunus.
Well, then let's move to the recommendation on page 13.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just before we do, I just wanted just before we kind of go off this topic, I just thought it'd be useful just to sum it up from the officer perspective. So I think just as Shahid said, some of the work that we're doing here is leading edge from a local authority perspective. We are absolutely putting in new technology, which will kind of underpin all of this. And the point raised around the culture change being absolutely critical, and we must make sure we give the right time to this to make sure that we kind of start with the end in mind. So from a timeline perspective, because I can see it's been raised by a number of different members tonight, what I'd like to suggest that we do is we work through that timeline as officers and come back to present that here. What I don't want to do is kind of set false promises that we can't then attend to. I'd much prefer to make sure that what we're doing is giving you a thought through approach on what's realistic in relation to timeline, because like you said tonight, a number of members have said having the narrative and the context is absolutely critical. When you're reviewing KPIs, we need to make sure that process is also built into the reporting of KPIs, both now and in the future. So I just want to make sure we'd had an opportunity to just kind of finish the conversation with that in mind, Madam Chair.
That was why I said take the suggestion away and have a think about it. Come back
Thank you.
Lovely. But the recommendation is very simple, really, to endorse the Council's Q1 Performance Monitoring Report for the period covering April to June 2021. A bit basic compared to the discussion we've had, but are you happy with that as a recommendation? We have considered it. Anyone against? That way. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, all of you, Shahid and the officers who've come, not only for your time tonight, but the time and effort that you're putting into this really, really worthwhile work. Thank you very much on behalf of the committee. Thank you. Right then, let us move to agenda item 29, council motions. This is about our checking what's happened to motions that have been passed at the council and making sure that we know that something has happened about them. And Neil's put together this report with a suggestion on when we'll do this. If we have a look at the recommendation, we are scrutinising it, we're doing number 1. But number 2 and 3, we really need to agree tonight how often and when we would like these reports and see whether there are any further ideas to improve performance. So has anybody got any thoughts on when we should have this information? Sarah?
I was just just thinking about it. I mean, an annual, maybe at the first meeting of the municipal year, to have a look at what's happened in that previous year. And then from that meeting, if there was any that we wanted to look into a little bit deeper, then we have the opportunity through the rest of the municipal year to put it at an appropriate time during that year into an agenda. But I would have thought at the beginning of the year for the previous year would make sense, but open to discussion.
Norman?
Yeah, I mean, I think the suggestion is annually. I think annually is a good idea. I was just looking at the dates of all the motions, and they're all sort of from July through to November. So I just wonder whether November would actually be a good time of year to have scrutiny of the motions. It would also allow all the councillors by then will have had at least sort of 6-7 months experience. So it would be maybe quite a good time rather than doing it at the start of the new municipal year. So that would be my suggestion, just do it sometime around November, probably.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, I'd like to propose, I think December's a good time. I think gives us time to review and, gives us sort of, I think, an end of year kind of time to sort of go over what's been, all the course of the year previously.
You're saying December, not November?
Yep, December, correct.
Sorry, I don't think we have a meeting, so maybe November. We don't have a meeting.
We don't have a meeting in December, so you really want to propose November?
Okay, November's fine.
Okay. That's a formal proposal. Is there somebody that wants to second that? Thank you, Norman. Well, let's vote on that then, that we review them annually at the December meeting. Can I see those in favour of doing
November.
That? Sorry? November, sorry. Those in favour of November. That's 9 years. On the screen. You put your hands up again. it's everybody anyway. It's unanimous. That's great. So, so if we look at number 2, then we perhaps need to amend that to continue an annual feedback report in November. Just add those words in. And looking at number 3, has anybody got any further ideas that would improve the process? Sorry, Guy, no, Rachel, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to suggest that there's a dedicated area on the website for motions, because at the moment it's really difficult for councillors and members of the public to see what motions have been passed. You have to look in various different reports of meetings. So if we had this report and then had a dedicated area where the motions were published and then there was some detail about implementation, I think that would enable us and members of the public to better scrutinise what the council said it would do and whether it's actually done it.
So are you sort of formally proposing that? So, and I'll give you some words, tell me if you want them changed, that we have a dedicated area of the website where motions are published and the action taken on them. Okay. Any seconders? Well, I'm happy to second that. Right. Anybody against then? Lovely. Any further suggestions? No. Sorry, Rachel again.
Just one other thought in terms of what is considered in the annual report. I think looking back a year is fine, but I also think if there are, motions on there which we don't consider have been properly, fully sort of completed, that they should remain on the report and until we are sort of satisfied that they've been completed. Yeah. And I agree with Sarah's point as well about being able to ask for additional scrutiny. So there'll be some, like, one example is the council tax protocol. There's a lot of detail in that. So it wouldn't be a quick job to scrutinise it. So we need that ability to be able to say, actually, we want more on this one. We don't need so much on that one. Yeah.
I had taken this as read that it wouldn't drop off the agenda until it had been done satisfactorily. Put a bit of speed behind the officers. Okay, is there anything else? So, you've got the amendment number 2 and number 3 if we put about the dedicated area on the website. Sorry, Guy.
Thank you. Just I completely agree that the any motion shouldn't drop off. I noticed in one of the appendixes we only went back to 2018, I believe it was. There are some motions of which I proposed one a long time ago that are still outstanding regarding a third Thames bridge, but considering the programme initially to start that started in about 1917, I think we might need to be conscious of some aspects of when these proposals drop off from a motion point of view. So just a word of caution on that.
Yeah. And I was also going to suggest that the motions are written out in full as they were in the original. Alison. Well, what Neil's put is a great summary. And the one that I proposed, I now can't remember the exact words of it, only what it's about. But Alison?
Where it says submitted by, many motions when they're going through council get amended and then they're passed.
Yeah.
So I can't remember all of these. So apologies to those of you who were listed. But is that the same thing that we're listing submitted by, whereas the motion that was actually passed by the full council might have been the amended version that a different councillor put forward. So to my mind, it's then their motion that was passed.
Neil, any thoughts on that?
Well, in the report, we can make it clear who originally submitted it and then if amendments were taken on board.
Lovely, thank you.
But sorry, I don't actually see the point in that. We simply need to have, it would just be the amended motion because that is the thing that the council is directed to do. So then it would be the name of the person who put forward the amended motion.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Alison, because it could be completely changed, couldn't it?
No, it can't be completely changed. That's against the constitution.
Yes, but I mean, it could be changed so much that the original proposer might not be terribly happy with the wording. Neil, would you like to have a think about that and see what the best way forward is? And Alison, if you've got any suggestions, perhaps you could email them to Neil.
Sorry, and secondly,
Yeah.
on the back of, as Guy said, I think it should be 5 years, not 3.
Okay.
Just 3 years isn't, sadly, it's not that long sometimes. And as Rachel said, which I agree with, it's really important to have these things on the website for our residents to be able to look at and see what's been going on. It gives them a lot more information and background.
What should be 5 years?
And I don't think, well, you know what, the table here just goes back to September 2018.
Oh, I see. Most over the last.
Yeah,
5
so
years.
the rolling report each year, Neil, would be the last 5 years, not the last 3.
Okay.
I don't think it shouldn't add too much work, would it?
Okay. Right. I think I've got all of those points down. Let me read out what I've jotted down, and if you've got complaints about it, put your hand up. Motion should come to us from the previous 5 years. There should be a dedicated area of the website where motions are published and the action on them taken, reported. And it remains on the agenda of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee until the work has been completed. And lastly, that motions are written out for us in full. Is that a reasonable summary of what we've said? Okay. So is anybody against that? Lovely. Neil, if you haven't got all those words, I'll give them to you at the end. That's super then. So the recommendation being, going back to front, what I've just said, and number 2, to consider the annual report in November, giving details of motions agreed by council in the preceding 5 years, together with any outcomes and any issues arising. And we dealt with number 1. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation as it now stands, please? Thank you very much. That's great. Lovely. And thank you, Neil, for that report. I think this will be a huge step forward, because if I hadn't followed up my own motions with officers, I wouldn't know that they'd done anything. Scrutiny needs to know that. Right then, item 30, agenda item 30. The current executive forward programme on page 67. Any comments? Okay, then let's move to page 71. Draft work programmes, which actually start on page 72. First of all, our own management committee. Everybody happy with that set of dates? Sarah?
Can I just ask that on the November one, we've obviously got the next performance report coming, and I wonder if that would be a good opportunity for them to come back to us with some further plans on the KPIs they're looking at, as we've just discussed. Obviously, they wanted to come to us as stakeholders, and I wonder if that would be the opportunity to do that.
No, I think that's probably when he would do that report back. Is that right, Neil?
Yes, I think so. But I can ask them.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Moving on then from the November meeting over the new year to January and February. Okay, right, let's go to Children's Services. Norman, are you happy with that one as it stands?
Yes, I am happy with this one.
Right, okay. And then Guy, are you happy with your one?
Just double skimming through. There have been some changes. There is some additional items coming in November.
Right.
Which we got that's the medium-term financial plan. And was there anything else? I know there is a lot of chopping changing currently going on due to timescales and the bus strategy and things like that is due to come as well. And I have no idea what happened on page 80 because everything appears to have blurred into several of the same lines.
Yes.
Plan. I think that's medium-term financial plan, and then the borough-wide parking strategy as well. I don't know what's happened on that particular formatting. And once again, I am Mr. Extraordinary meeting for the 3rd of November, but that is because we want the budget this year requires close scrutiny. So we are looking at the additional meetings in order to meet timescales. Also, just as a reminder to everyone, there is training on budget scrutiny taking place next Monday virtually. If you haven't got an invite, poke me and poke Callum and we will get one out to you. And I think that covers me.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Alison has disappeared. So I was going to comment that I'm really glad that the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee is looking at the provision of GPs, because that is a real problem all over the whole borough, I think, and no end of complaints about it. So I'm glad we're going to be looking at that, or at least Alison's committee is going to be looking at that. Okay, then let us move to agenda item 32, the Action Tracker report. Is there anything anyone would like to add to that, or make any comments on what's happening? Guy, did you want to say something?
No, Sarah asked me a question. I was just letting him know the answer.
It's not one we can all share.
It was just an update on the bus strategy, which was due to come to the 6th of October. It's tentative at the moment. I was just looking for the note in my system.
Okay.
I was making the point it goes to executive in October, so if it doesn't go to that one, it's a bit late.
Point taken. Okay. Right, no comments then on the action tracker, but is it useful to have this information? Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Neil, for keeping us updated on it. And there being no other business, I thank you all for coming and declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your contributions.